Are you ready to turn your podcast into an authority engine and not just more content? Welcome to Influential Voices of Authority, the podcast for coaches, consultants, and experts who are ready to stop being the best kept secret in their niche and are ready to become the sought after authority. I'm your host, Erik K. Johnson, podcast talent coach and media veteran. Thanks for being here. In each episode of Influential Voices of Authority, I sit down with industry leaders and visibility experts to uncover how they use their voice, their message, and their platform to build trust, grow their audience, and attract premium clients. That's what the show is all about. If you're ready to turn your voice into your greatest asset, you're in the right place. Welcome to Influential Voices of Authority. You know, authority comes down in many forms, and you hear it so often that you should repurpose your content. So many gurus and experts say, repurpose your content, but they don't really tell you how. And it sounds like a lot more work than it should be. Well, if you create it once and you share it everywhere, it sounds good. It sounds good in theory, but what if you took all of that content you're creating and you aggregated that content into a longer piece, like a book? That's what today's episode is all about. When you aggregate all of your content into a longer piece of a book, you're able to scale your authority exponentially. You have dozens of episodes sitting out there. They're just waiting to be curated into an authority building book that you can use to gain even more attention. And I know you're thinking, it's all free. Why would people buy my book if they can go get it for free with the podcast? Well, they'll buy it for a few different reasons. They buy it because you're making it easier for them. They don't have to sift through dozens of episodes to find what they need. You've put it all in the book for them. So now they don't have to go download dozens of episodes. Your content also condenses it and makes it easier for them to find. They don't need to go out and listen to dozens of hours of your podcast. They just get the best of the best right there in your book because you've distilled it all down. You've condensed the best parts of it in the book. And then finally, people like to consume content in a variety of ways. Some like audio, some like video, some like written word. A lot of times podcasters will come to me and they say, should I do audio or video? Oh, which one should I do? My answer is you should do both. Because some people like watching video, some people like listening to audio. So do both of them and really connect with your audience. Give them multiple ways to consume your content, and written word is another way. Some people just like to read books, and that's what you can do. You can provide them your content in book form. And then finally, turning a podcast into a book gives you a chance to leverage your content in a huge way. And it's much easier than you think. That's why I'm excited to bring you this interview today. Tina Dietz is our guest today. She's an award-winning vocal leadership expert, and she's a pioneer in voice-powered publishing. She takes your podcast and turns it into a book. She's been recognized in Forbes, in Inc. magazine, on all the networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and more. She is the founder and CEO of Twin Flames Studios. They are a leading audio publishing company. They're known for their craftsmanship, quality, and client-first experience. But here's why I have her on today. Through her leadership at Twin Flames Studios, Tina has helped hundreds of entrepreneurs, content creators, and industry experts bring their voices to life in a book. Her team produces world-class audiobooks and crafts books, physical books, from podcast content, transforming spoken insight into assets that build trust, expand reach, and open new doors for visibility and revenue. And really, isn't that why you're here? Plus, it's really super cool that she was also featured as the lead interviewer on the podcasting documentary, The Messengers. And if you haven't seen that, I highly recommend it. Tina Dietz is a trusted voice, setting the standard for the future of voice-powered publishing. And she's here to show you how to build your authority and influence by transforming your podcast episodes into a book. Enjoy my conversation with Tina Dietz. Hey, Tina, great to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Oh, my pleasure, Erik.
Absolutely. Twin Flame Studios, You guys are creating content in all sorts of forms with insights and 5-minute advice for authors and drink from the well. Tell me the difference between each of those and the purpose they serve in the business.
Well, some of them don't really serve a purpose in the business. So I'll draw back the curtain and tell you that right now. A lot of our things, content that we create for ourselves, for the company, is for a specific moment in time. And it serves a purpose for that time. It might not serve a purpose forever. I've been in business a long time, and I am at heart a creator. So I want to experiment with formats that we can use for certain purposes, but we always then learn something that we then roll into and leverage into what might be our next thing. And so allowing ourselves to experiment, allowing myself to experiment is something I have to have in my life, or I lose my mind. I know. Do you consider yourself a creative person?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that creative urge has to be there.
yeah. You just get tired of one thing and let's start something else and create a new vision. Give me an example, a specific example
Yeah,
of
sure.
something that you created for a specific purpose and how it rolled into something bigger.
Oh, perfect example for you. So Drink from the Well, as you noted, was a brainchild I had a bunch of years ago when we were working more with corporate podcasting. We had a corporate podcasting production division. We were producing all different kinds of podcasts, but all in the business space. And I wanted to create a podcast that was geared towards those audiences, to be about what it took to lead effective teams, unusual forms of leadership. What would it be? But I wanted to put it in an unusual wrapper, something that would appeal to me. So I used the metaphor of the hero's journey and the point in the hero's journey where they kind of go to the well to be refreshed and they always gain wisdom at that point. And so we use that metaphor and even kind of got into some fun kind of Lord of the Rings fantasy style imagery to do that because that's how I roll. And I also ended up having a team of 7 college interns work on it at the same time. So it was an educational experience for them. We got fresh creativity brought to the team, and we did both interview podcasting as well as narrative podcasting, which we hadn't done a lot of up until that point. So it was a experiment of epic proportions, and we ended up producing, I think, 7, 8 episodes of that. And by the time we produced it and launched it, we as a company were no longer doing corporate podcasting.
It's good while it lasted.
It was fantastic. It actually got us a lot of attention. It
Tell me about that. How
inspired,
did it
yeah.
get you attention? How did it build your authority in the corporate world?
Oh, in the corporate world, because we kind of stopped going into that direction for a while,
Okay.
but I had done a fair amount of, most of my career has been B2B. It's
Yeah.
mostly been, working with other people who are in business rather than large groups of consumers and end users, so to speak. So what I got a lot of feedback was on is that a bunch of our audiobook clients and authors are consultants. And so I showed them this podcast as an example of short form, limited series podcasting. And also, how do you take podcast content and turn it into lunch and learns for employee
Oh, yeah.
resource groups? How do you do it for actual corporate purposes? So, some of them, after doing an audiobook with us, just were able to take that and run with it and make it their own. So I felt really great that we were able to provide additional value to our audiobook clients who are part of our community, right? And so ultimately, one of the things I learned from that was I didn't want to do narrative podcasting. It is extremely time intensive, and I have deep, deep respect for people that do that. But I also had more of a bug to create deeper community and wider community. And so what that ended up becoming are two things that one thing that I've been doing for 4 years now, and that kind of overlapped with this period where we were doing corporate podcasting, which is I have a gathering called the Publishing Tea, which is for experienced publishing professionals, mostly in the non-traditional space. And I wanted to be having deeper conversations with all of these folks who are colleagues and referral partners for our audiobooks and podcast services and whatnot. And so, because I love to facilitate, I became a gatherer of authority people. And so, when you gather people who are authorities in their own space, you become an authority of authorities.
Yeah, I use that. I call that borrowed trust, right?
Yeah,
When you're associated with people who already have authority and already have trust, you kind of bask in their halo and you kind of gain that authority and that trust from them because they're introducing you to people who already trust them, and you kind of get that same sort of trust and authority just by being in their presence and being in their circle.
exactly. And so, and this was now a mutual thing because I
Yeah.
was already so well connected in the industry. It was a matter of bringing people together for a reason they wanted. So I was a business coach for many years before I got into audio. And I was a therapist. I've lived a million lives. Uh, so gathering people together is something I always love to do. If I live close to people, you'd be at my house for dinner. I am an Italian grandmother in training. It's just the way I roll,
I
and
love it.
yeah. And so being a gatherer of people who are in authority does take a trust on their part to trust me that this is going to be good. And so I don't take that lightly. And now what that has evolved into, in 4 years is 180 experienced publishing professionals in this gathering group. And we get anywhere from about 25 to 40 folks a month live in a
Oh, nice.
gathering where I facilitate breakout conversations. And it is kind of like a mini peer-to-peer mastermind. And I offer this for free for my community. We have a directory of vetted professionals that authors can access.
Oh,
And
wow.
then we turned it into, we have monthly public events as well for authors who want to be advised. And I basically facilitate panels of experts on different topics that authors are interested in. So now it's become an ecosystem and it's become a community. So I have a community of professionals and I have a community of rising and existing authors. And so we're able to have everybody interact in different ways that are beneficial for everyone. And I basically get to stand at the epicenter of that and, be as much of a maestro as I can stand being,
Yeah,
basically.
and the ultimate connector, you're bringing all of these folks together,
That's
which
right.
is amazing. Now, with Drink from the Well, you were the host of that podcast, but I
Yes.
jumped on YouTube and checked out a 5 minute advice for authors.
Yeah.
The very first video I see at the top is Oscar Trimboli, who was a client of mine.
Oh, no kidding.
I helped him with his podcast when
Oh
he
my
was
God.
launching Deep Impact or Deep Listening Impact Beyond Words, which became his book, and then he wrote his
Yep.
second book, and just a fantastic guy. But I noticed that on the 5 minute advice for authors, it's authors. Each one of them is a different author giving a piece of advice. How does that work into your business model?
Well, that was another experiment that turned out really interestingly. Most business owners who are in the service industries, you have an issue of how do you get testimonials?
Yeah.
How do you get people sharing about your work? And I have found that the best way to get people to share about your work is to offer them an opportunity to do so. And authors are really busy. And these are all nonfiction authors who are influential in their own spheres. And I designed a podcast that was truly 5 minutes long. If I had to do it over again, I would make it 10 or 15 for a couple
Okay.
of logistic reasons and also because YouTube's a jerk. Um,
This just in.
this just in, water is wet, YouTube's a jerk. Uh, but but how I did it, it was a 3 question podcast. And so I wanted the author to be able to promote their book. I wanted people who were listening to get a piece of wisdom, and I wanted us to get a testimonial.
Okay.
So I literally made a 3 question podcast that allowed for that to happen. And I opened up slots in my calendar. I reached out to our client list and I filled all 47 of the time slots that I had in under 24 hours
That's
with our
fantastic.
authors. Yeah,
So
they were
as
into it. They
as
were
I
so
watched
into it. Yeah.
Oscar's
Yeah.
Oscar's blip, it's just Oscar. Like you take out the questions and it's just Oscar talking about his journey and his book and things like that. And it's a great way for you and Twin Flame Studios to create content without you actually creating the content. Like
Yes.
your authors are creating the content.
Well, we were there. I was there interviewing them. So I used it as an opportunity. So everybody got on a conversation with me. They were 20-minute meetings. So it's easy for people to fit into their calendars.
Yeah.
I was very explicit. My team and I created, this is what it's going to be. Here are the three questions. Think about it in advance. So we did a bunch of prep. But it also allowed me to connect with them again because a lot of these folks my team works with, I don't necessarily work with them on a day-to-day basis because I transitioned into the CEO role a couple of years ago. So I'm out doing a lot of business development conversations, working with publishers to develop relationships, et cetera. And so our day-to-day clients are served by my unbelievably amazing team. And
Yeah.
so this allowed me to create more collegial conversations with our authors. And some of those turned into other opportunities to work together. Some of that turned into opportunities for me to be on their podcasts. And we got a podcast recorded all in a 20-minute conversation. So it was really, really, really beautiful. So we have the podcast on YouTube. We have it on our website. We have it on audio on all the podcast platforms. And we have a playlist that is just the testimonial part that we can then give to prospective authors. And it's also embedded on our website as well. So we even created an ebook. We haven't even released it yet. That is absolutely gorgeous. So I like to use content. I am the queen of repurposing. I really,
Yeah,
really am. And
absolutely.
that's how we ended up creating books from podcast content with Podcraft. So we've gone even further.
Many coaches ask me, should I do video or audio? And I say, well, do both, right? Just like you're talking, take it, put it on YouTube, take the audio, create the podcast for all the podcast platforms, transcribe it, put it on your website as a blog post, do
That's right.
all of it, be everywhere you can. You've been taking this audio content from podcasts and really transforming spoken word and insight into these assets that build trust and expand
Yeah.
reach and just open doors, right, for visibility and revenue, growing your business. How can our content, whether it's on our podcast or transformed into a book, open new doors for us?
It starts with thinking about your content less as content and more as a body of work.
Okay.
And when you've been creating for a while, it becomes almost impossible to go, what is everything that I've created? What is everything that I talk about? You have a sense of who you are, what you stand for, your values. As you rise in leadership, these are things that you end up hopefully considering as you go along. And once you kind of you have this mass of content, it's important to grab all of that content and sort through it and start to see where the patterns are. And, we've developed additional technology to be able to do that and sort through large bodies of work. That's why we're able to produce book content from podcast content or other content as well.
Does it sort through audio or do you have to transcribe it to
You
written
have to
text?
transcribe it. At this
Okay.
point, it's much more cost efficient to sort through transcription than it
Okay.
is through actual audio content. What we're planning on doing is adding audio and video capability so that one of the things we do is what's called a voice print. And when we're analyzing content into a body of work or what we call as a corpus, it's a terrible Latin word, but it sounds cool. So this body work, this corpus, we're able to pick out themes and patterns, even values from what you're talking about. And then when we create what's called a voice print, which is from the host's perspective, things you commonly say. What's your level of speaking? What are some of your common phrases that you say, repeated things? What style of storytelling do you typically go into? So it starts to profile you. And we're planning on adding voice and audio to what we're doing in our analysis tools so that we can get down further into things like body language and tonality, tempo, and things like that. So that'll be
So
the next phase.
you were talking about you stop viewing it as content and start viewing it as a body of work.
Yeah.
As you're going along, at what point in time does it stop being like like how big does the mass have to be for it to be a body of work that establishes authority?
I think that always depends on how much authority you're coming into a situation with.
Okay.
And I'll break that down a little further. So I mentioned a while ago that I had been a therapist. And so if I had been writing published articles for journals, or I had been a therapist just doing case studies on my clients for a while, all of that would be part of a body of work without me ever having written a blog post or a social media post or all of that. It's when you start committing your thinking to a format outside of yourself. That is when a body of work begins, and you can start to commit to paper or to audio or to video or any of these places. As for volume, with podcasts, I would say that if you've got and we're talking about podcasts that are not, morning drive style podcasts or even really fiction podcasts. Fiction operates very differently. But business, finance, spirituality, parenting, health and wellness, kind of the nonfiction genres, as we
Yeah.
would say.
Right.
If you've got at least 50 episodes, I would even say, 35, 40, we can really start to pull out some strong patterns, and that allows you as somebody who is rising in authority to decide, what do you want to build on?
Give me an example of a client that came to you who didn't think they were ready. I'm not sure I have enough to make this into a book. And you were like, oh, absolutely. Let us take it and transform it for you. You have an example for me?
Um, I will say that everyone that we've worked with so far has had a minimum of 50 episodes.
Okay.
I don't like to work with fewer than that because we when you're creating a book and authority, you don't want to not be working with a solid body of work.
Right.
And so our ethical core says don't violate the possible relationship because the relationship is in front of you right now and somebody's got cash in hand. For me, that's wrong. So I've actually have a couple of folks who are in the process of developing their shows or maybe about 25, 30 episodes in. And we've just in conversation started to, you know, pull out, well, you're already talking about this. Do you want to talk about this some more? Yes, no. So there's some consulting that happens at that level, but to actually create the book, we want to have that volume because we want to be able to pull out and this isn't transcribing things and cleaning up podcast episodes and slapping them into a book. This is taking content and truly going through a ghostwriting and developmental editing process, in addition to pulling out the corpus and the body of work. So it's far more complex than that. But to go back to your original piece, I will say that we worked recently with a couple who are absolutely delightful to create a book called The Loud Quiet, which is um, should be out by the time this airs, actually. And so they really were in their first year and a half of podcasting. And the podcast is about their experience being empty nesters for the first time and what that experience was like from a personal development, their relationship, how it changed them as parents, and then also how they're changing roles with their own aging parents and becoming more of a caregiver role rather than being the children of their parents. So all of those identity shifts and logistical shifts happening at the same time. I met them at Podfest in 2024, in fact. And the ironic thing is, I had just become an empty nester and I had looked for books on this topic. There's none. There's
Right.
none,
Right.
none.
It's like, good luck.
Good
Everybody has
luck.
a book about
Enjoy.
parenting, but nobody has the book about the other end of it.
And none at all,
Yeah.
none at all. So there's plenty about when they're babies and when you don't have time to read, you know,
Yes.
no problem there. Uh, so I was very happy to have the Kismet of running into them and working with them to create this book, but they didn't know they had about 80 episodes when they came to us, and we had to, of course, select like not necessarily all the content to work with, but how do you be judicious about what gets included and what doesn't? And that's what happens in every single one of our cases, particularly if you have a lot of episodes. It's pretty wild. But in terms of authority building, there is a really unfortunate reality about podcasting, which is you don't get the same respect as a podcaster that you do as an author or a professional speaker,
Right.
right? And we're looking to change that because
Well,
that
and
is not the case.
that's the truth for speakers as well who don't have a book or a podcast. Right. If you stack those pieces on top of each other, then all of a sudden it starts to explode. It starts to multiply exponentially because not only are you a speaker, but you're also an author and you're also a podcaster. And now you're on multiple platforms and it's giving you even a greater sense of authority and visibility.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, I really strongly believe, Eric, that it's the relationships that make the biggest difference. That's where I've spent my time. We have 300,000 social media followers. We've been down that road. It doesn't generate us business, but it does allow us to use our reach to help our authors.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, when we're helping our authors and we're helping our colleagues, and we do talk about ourselves, of course we do. It's marketing.
Yep.
Uh, but it allows us to do it in a way that it's not just about us. And so what happens fairly frequently now is in a Facebook group, or the other day it was on LinkedIn. Someone I had been connected to on LinkedIn and actually reached out to previously for a conversation as a colleague, but they didn't know me. They didn't respond. Reached out and said, "Hey, can anyone recommend an audiobook producer or company to work with me and my authors?" My name and my company's name showed up for this gentleman 8 times in an hour.
That's fantastic.
Right. And that does my heart so good. Not because, oh, these people, I'm top of mind, but wow, people believe in what we're doing. We
Yeah,
have a
you have,
relationship that, remember who we are when
yep.
it counts.
That's exactly what I
And
was going to say.
yeah,
You have the relationship to where people are now recommending you.
yeah, yeah. And it's spent so much time and so many years going, when is this networking crap gonna pay off?
Right.
It can be really brutal. It can be
I
brutal.
like to tell content creators you don't make money from your podcast, you make money with your podcast. Your
Yes.
podcast isn't generating money, it's helping you make connections and build relationships to people who can then help you with your offer so you can promote whatever is going to make you money. And if you picture it that way, it's so much more powerful.
What?
You've been
Perfect.
helping. Twin Flame Studios literally pioneered this first fully guided remote audiobook recording experience
Yes.
for podcasters. Tell me about the biggest oh wow moment, the biggest door that has been opened to someone you helped create a book with. You helped them create a book and then all of a sudden something clicked, something made a connection with somebody, or they experienced something, a door opened for them, something like that for one of your authors.
So we've produced over 500 audiobooks.
Wow.
So there's a lot of moments.
Yeah.
And yes, we were the first nonfiction. We pioneered remote recording for author narrated audiobooks, and that's what we're best known for, even though we produce everything. Um, but just recently, one of my favorite things that happened, and this is also very relational, we produced an audiobook for a book called Raising Ricky. And it was this amazing woman's account of helping to raise her brother
Oh
who
wow.
had Down syndrome. and then had early onset Alzheimer's, and their whole journey and what she learned. I mean, it is an absolutely gorgeous memoir and book of their story and this shared relationship and her view of the world and his view of the world, and a very unique situation. The author decided not to narrate it themselves for a couple of different reasons. And so we went out and did our narrator search. And the narrator that we ended up working with the book also had a brother, younger brother with Down syndrome, who she helped care for, who died from early onset Alzheimer's.
Oh, wow.
What are the freaking chances of something like that
What a
happening?
connection.
So the two of them had this unbelievable connection. And normally our narrators don't spend a lot of time with the authors. We're managing the project and everything. But in this case, we're like, that's ridiculous. We have to, we
Yeah.
have to make sure
Yeah.
they
We have to
get
make that
together.
introduction. Yeah.
Um, so just a couple of weeks ago, I got a notice from the narrator that she was nominated for and won a very prestigious voiceover award called the SOVAS Award, and for best narration of an audiobook.
Was it
And
for
so
that book or for a different
for that
book?
book,
For that
for
book.
that book.
Wow.
And I just couldn't think of a more deserving situation for something like that to happen. And so, yeah, our name is out there, and yeah, we're the publisher or we're producers on the audiobook and all of that good stuff. But it's so great to be able to use my platform to lift that story up and to create that kind of breakthrough. And yeah, the narrator is gonna their reputation gets boosted. The book gets a boost from all of the promotion that happens from an award like that. And that's just huge. I mean, we've probably had at least 2 or 3 dozen, if not many more, because a lot of times folks don't tell us when they win an award. Award-winning audiobooks, especially for the ones that we've done that have had multiple narrators. And our record for number of voices on a book is 36.
In one book.
In one book, all
Wow.
recorded remotely. Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
That is crazy.
So the
That's
creativity
some
does
editing right there.
it. Oh,
Congratulations
my
to your editing
editors,
team.
let me tell
Holy
you,
cow.
they're incredible. They're incredible. Yeah, it's
So,
beautiful.
why is it better to take your podcast or the content you've already created and turn that into a book rather than just go through a traditional book writing process of creating the outline and writing the book?
I mean, you can. I mean, it really has to do with, it's not what you have to do, it's what you want to do. So, after working with 500 plus authors, we've heard a lot of stories. I mean, we understand the labor of love that writing a book really is. It's a deeply transformational process. But it's a deeply transformational process. We hear from folks who have had their books ghostwritten, from folks who have written it themselves and work with book coaches, not work with book coaches. I mean, developmental editors. There's a lot that goes into creating book. Um, what we find with podcasts is that it is a body of work that is overlooked most of the time. People look to their blog posts, their keynote addresses, or their times that they've guested on a podcast more than they look to the content of their actual podcast. Partly because a lot of podcasts involve guests, and you go, well, there's guests on, so I don't know how I'm going to involve the guests and things like that. And partly because there's a reduced understanding of the value of being somebody who convenes and curates wisdom. That's just what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
You've selected, yeah, I didn't apply to be at a show. We met, we had a conversation. You very carefully curate the people that are on your show and the conversation and what gets focused on. That is all inside of your context of your expertise. And I'm here to showcase and bolster the values that you know are important in your body of work. Right?
So I have about 550 episodes of Podcast Talent Coach. At
Yeah.
what point is there too much content to sift through to create a book, and how much pre-qualification of the episodes that you go through need to be done prior to, all right, let's take these 50 or 100 or 250 to
Yeah.
turn into a book?
There's a diagnostic process. We've had that happen because The Shape of Change had 280 episodes.
Yeah.
Salad with a Side of Fries had 500 episodes. Responder Resilience had 200 episodes. And so then you have to get down into the strategy about what kind of book do you want to create related to the goals that you have for yourself.
Okay.
So it's a Venn diagram. So it's like, this is the content I have. This is who I want to be reaching. This is how I want it to impact my platform, my career, my listeners, all of that. And we had to kind of put all of that together. So once we have the body of work analyzed and we understand what the themes are, then we can get more granular about which episodes we might be drawing on based on the type of book that wants to get created. So, when we were working with Responder Resilience, which is about the world of first responders and first responder leadership, first responder wellness, first responder experiences, um, healing after trauma, there's a lot of different pieces. We could have written about 8 different books out of their content, but what ended up being the most useful and targeted for their goals was to create the world's first guide for mental health clinicians for working with first responders effectively. And now they're creating continuing education courses for mental health providers as well as leaders inside of the first responder world through their nonprofit organization. And this book is leveraging that and also helping them get grants for being able
Wow.
to fund these courses so that mental health practitioners can get scholarships so they can serve first responders better. So that strategy is so crucial. And in the publishing world, that's the piece that often gets stepped over because a lot of book companies, a lot of publishing companies, they're selling production, not
Yeah.
strategy. And if you don't have the strategy, you got nothing.
Well, and part of your Venn diagram talked about that strategy
Yeah.
about where do you want the content to go? Where are we trying to take people? What is the ultimate destination?
Yep.
And so as I'm starting to think about podcast into a book, how does that change the role our ideas play in our business and our brand and our authority to
Mm.
as we're going down that path?
Yeah, it opens up a lot of possibilities, doesn't it? Uh, because once you can wrap your arms around, wow, these are the patterns in my body of work. These are the values. These are the principles. This is really what I'm talking about. And you get that reflected back to you. Like, Eric, that you're working with people around authority and you have a body of work around that and all of that. But to see it reflected back to you is a very powerful experience. It's very holographic to the type of experience that people have when they're recording their audiobook and they're getting their voice back to them in this feedback loop. So when that happens, you're able to make even more informed strategic choices about where you want to grow your platform next. How do you want to be viewed as an authority? I mean, I actually have had authors cry when they because they feel so seen
Yeah.
and getting this work
Acknowledged, right?
reflected back to them. It's like, yes, this is what meant to do. I didn't even know this was there and present in this body of work because it's just part of who we are. Now there's the opportunity for other people to see this work the way that I see this work. And or even to shift things into different directions. One of our other authors has been in the leadership world for over 20 years, very, very prominent. This was her 4th book. It's her shortest book. Her other leadership books regularly get used in colleges and universities as textbooks. They're thick, they're large, they're comprehensive. This book we wrote with her was her first book of reflective wisdom on leadership and leadership in really difficult times. And
Wow.
it is a meditation almost and a guide, something that you can kind of take with you and reflect on. And this is now representative of where she is in her own leadership journey and how she is working with other leaders in new ways. And she didn't even know that that was possible until we started this process together.
Yeah, I can imagine you're so close to the content that you can't see the whole body of work. And when you see it um, reflected back to you, you start
Yeah.
recognizing things. One of the things that I teach my clients when they're learning to become an authority is to find that insider language, that language that you use often. What are the terms and phrases that kind of identify your brand? And they're like, I don't have any of those. And I said, well, go back and look over your content because I bet there are phrases and words and examples that you give quite often that people reflect back to you a lot. So, how will a podcaster, how can a podcaster determine whether or not they're ready to write a book? Like, how do I know if my podcast is ready to turn into a book?
There's a couple of there will be signs. Here's your signs. Here's your green flags. Um, you have a minimum of 50, I will say, pieces of quality content.
Okay.
They don't even necessarily have to be podcast episodes. Right now, we are exploring working with a potential author who has 26 interviews from a summit she did a couple of years ago on the same topic that her podcast is, but her podcast only has about 30 episodes. So you've
Okay.
got about 50 pieces of content combined between blog posts, podcast episodes, and those are going to be, we're talking about at least a half an hour each or thereabouts. We're looking for meat in those
Okay.
types of things. Um, you find yourself in a place where you're like, I need to either reach more people. I want to be way better known in this industry. I'm like the best kept secret in
Right.
this
Check.
industry,
Right.
right?
Check and check.
Check and check. And you are in a place and position where you are willing to allow input from other professionals who have their own expertise. You got to be coachable, first of
Yeah.
all. And you are also not going to like jeopardize being able to pay your mortgage if you invest in a book,
Yes.
right? Let's be real.
Right.
Uh, let's be real, okay? Because even if you are doing most of it yourself, it's still going to create an investment of time and money. It's just in varying increments
Right.
based on
Yeah.
your situation. I think it's also important to have a clear audience and a clear goal for where you want to be going next. And even if
Yeah.
you're, kind of floating around like, what is my actual goal? If if you're podcasting regularly and you don't have your audience kind of who you're talking to nailed down, that's kind of an issue in and of itself. Particularly if you've already got 50 episodes.
Okay.
So that I think that's really important as well. In your mind, Erik, is there anything that you would think would also need to be present? I'm always curious.
Um, I like the vision. Like, where do you want to go? What are we trying?
Yeah,
Like, publishing a book just to have a book is going to be a lot of time and money invested
that's right.
without a strategy behind it. So why do you want to have the book? Because I think if
Exactly.
you find the deep why and the deep purpose within you, you're going to be able to suffer the struggles that comes with birthing a book.
Yeah,
My late mentor Dan Miller always used to say, you don't necessarily want to be the best writing author, you want to be the best selling author. And writing the book is only 20% of the process.
yeah,
Going through and getting it to the market and selling it is the other 80% of the process. And so you have to have some thick skin in order to get through that 80% to get your book out there. And if you don't have a solid why behind it, there's going to be some tough times that you're going to have to endure. And it's going to be challenging for you to do that without really understanding why you want the book out there in the world.
exactly. And so the process that we're using, because I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a creator and I'm doing all these things, like I don't want to create anything that I don't want to use myself.
Right.
I want to solve these issues. So I have an issue of time. Writing a book is extremely time consuming. I want a book, don't have the time. But obviously, pretty comfortable with the sound of my own voice. Been creating content for a long time. I have content. So how can I use this content to reach my goals? Well, like you said, why do I want a book? Well, books do change the way that your industry looks at you, thinks about you. It creates an entry level product that is very easily consumable for people. Once you have your content organized into a book, the organization of that book allows you to then create other derivative works that, quite honestly, are easier once you've organized the content than starting with just a pile of undifferentiated, again, blog posts, podcast episodes, etc. Now you know what you want to stand behind in a book, right? Podcast, we explore all kinds of topics. Books, we're curating what we're really standing behind long term. And that makes a difference in how we're planting our flags as
Yeah.
authorities, right? So we're also solving a problem of, compared to other options in the market, cost, because there are a lot of unscrupulous book production and publishing companies out there. If you spend any time in the industry, you'll go, wow, there are amazing people in this. Well, it's like any industry, I suppose, but there are amazing people in it. And then there's a whole bunch of charlatans as well.
Right.
And learning to discern between those two is terrible. And like I said, after 500 authors, we're very careful about who we work with, and we have an amazing community of people. So we have expertise at our fingertips and people that who work with us on these books who are the best at what they do. And because they give a crap about what they create, and they're really, really good at it. So the quality issue is there. The cost issue is mitigated, the time issue is mitigated, and you have this additional really valuable experience of understanding on a much deeper level what your body of work is so that you can make good choices. Um, so many authors create a book that people don't want,
Right.
or they create a
Yeah.
book that's way too big when they don't need to. So it needs to be consumable, it needs to be relatable, it needs to be something people go back to. So that's what we're creating.
You talked about investing time and money.
Mhm.
Um, Give me an idea of the time window from I start working with Twin Flame Studios to my books published. Like, what does that look like? And then what would an average investment in my book be to have Twin Flame Studios help me get it out to the world?
We are experiencing, we've been through 5 books. So this is a relatively new process for us. We're actually about to go through a second round, what we call a second round beta. And so it's taking about 6 months, 6 to 8 months from first call to book being available for sale.
Okay.
And some a little longer because that's the way our authors wanted it to go. They wanted it certain dates, or they needed to pull certain things together. So there's a flex there. But quality, reliable, nobody's hair on fire, 6 months is a really nice pace. And it's about 3 months to create the manuscript and about 3 months to go through the publishing process, because there's
Okay.
a lot more involved with that than people realize.
Right.
So that's timeline. In terms of cost, it depends on what an author wants to do with us. So we have made things modular for authors so that it is not an overwhelming process. So you can go and work with us through the strategy, the vision, the book brief, and your corpus, your body of work, your voice print, like the whole strategic process, and come out the other side with all of that data and information that belongs to you, and a full, it's about 20-page book brief that then in detail outlines your book and where the content in your podcast is coming from in each chapter, and if you want to take that and then you want to run with it and create your own book, you can do that. The second phase would be for us to actually create the manuscript for you through a ghostwriting and developmental editing process. And that will give you a manuscript that you could take to any publisher in the world or self-publish yourself if you want to go through that process on your own. But then we can also do that with you as well. So all of these things add on to each other. And then finally, there's that initial marketing piece. And launching a book is very different than long-term marketing a book. There is no cookie cutter approach. So we can do very deep assessment on what your strengths are, what you can leverage, what's also going to not be overwhelming and create a strategic plan for and key assets. A lot of times it's copywriting is what most people get stuck on, and like email copywriting, how to make requests for reviews, how to assemble a launch team that's really effective, how to get people to a launch party, those types of things. We end up doing a lot of. And then we have a package for that as well. So folks can start working with us for as little as 5K or as much as 25. It's pretty much
Oh,
a
wow.
range between the two.
If they have the things we talked about, they have over 50 episodes, they know their target market, they have an idea of what they want to accomplish. What's the best way to start that conversation with you and Twin Flame Studios?
Yeah, well, we got a landing page for that, Erik. So
Shock.
no, we basically do an assessment on every podcast that comes our way, and we'll tell you if we think it's a good fit or not. And if it is a good fit, then we get on a call together and we start walking through an initial overview of what are the key themes of your podcasts. We bring book vision ideas to the table to get the conversation started and get the creative juices flowing and see if it's a good relationship. Because again, at the end of the day, it's not a good relationship, you're not going to get a good book out of it. So that's where we start. So with that brief assessment that we have on our website and letting us know some more about your podcast, and then we do some analysis on the back end and come back out with some information for you and an opportunity to have a conversation. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
You can find that at Twin Flames Studios, plural.com, twinflamestudios.com/bookvision. And if you're ready to write your book, Tina and her team are waiting to help you. This has been fantastic. We went much longer than we expected to go.
I'm like, what time is it?
I just love the conversation. I love creating authority with our content, and that you have so many great ideas for us. Thanks for taking time with us. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for sharing all your wisdom.
Oh, my pleasure, Erik. Thanks for letting me talk.
Oh, such a great conversation with Tina. Big thanks to her for spending some time with us today. Make sure you grab her free gift. If your podcast is ready to be a book, you can find out. Get Tina's short assessment. It will help you determine whether your show is a strong fit for Podcraft, their world-class podcast to published book method and program. You can take the quick assessment. Just visit twinflamesstudios.com/bookvision. twinflamesstudios.com/bookvision and see if your podcast is ready to be transformed into a book. You know, you've published all the episodes, you've stayed consistent, you know your content is good, yet you're not being seen as the authority in your niche. Your podcast isn't creating the level of influence and opportunity that you expected when you launched it. People listen, but they don't take action, and you sound professional, but not unforgettable. Well, the truth is, consistency alone doesn't create authority. Intentional leadership does. Are you ready to turn your podcast into an authority engine and not just more content? Would you like to move past being the best kept secret in your niche to being the recognized authority? Let me audit your podcast and help you find the gaps. If you head over to podcasttalentcoach.com/coaching, you can click the button on that page and apply to have a chat with me. We will sit down together. We will uncover your authority positioning problem. We will develop a plan to help you succeed, and we'll see how I can help and support you to achieve your podcast and vision goals. You can get your podcast audit right now at podcasttalentcoach.com/coaching. Find it all over there. On the next episode, we are going to talk to Dr. Catrice Austin about how to be seen as a member of the media in order to grow our importance, our influence, and our authority. That's all on next week's episode. Oh, and in addition to that, she's going to tell you how she became a clue on Jeopardy. She was actually a question on Jeopardy, which was fantastic and fascinating. We're going to share those stories on next week's episode. Can't wait to see you there. Until then, step into your authority, and we'll see you next time.